Hi, Nick here, and today I want to talk about the aging of top woods on acoustic guitars. So most acoustic guitars are going to have some sort of spruce top, generally Sitka spruce, which is what this is. So anyway, the whole idea here is that most people think that vintage or old sounds better, and in some cases that's true. I think in part it depends on your style and what you're trying to get out of the guitar. But in order to cater to the market of people who want a vintage or older sounding guitar, a lot of guitar manufacturers, from boutique builders all the way up to big players like Taylor and Martin, have started offering guitars with pre-baked spruce tops. The process is called torrefying the wood, or torrefaction, and the idea is that they bake the spruce tops at higher temperatures in a controlled low oxygen environment. But the end result of this baking process is that the natural sugars in the wood crystallize and give you a more vintage sounding top. So in general, newer spruce tops are going to be lighter in color, and they're going to sound a bit more round, bright, and squishy than a vintage top. And this is not necessarily a bad thing, but as a top ages, it loses some brightness and gains some warmth. The notes become less round and squishy, and they become dry, crisp, and woody, and the tone gets warmer and mellower. And generally this is good. A lot of players who are into like bluegrass or string band music or old-timey blues and folk really go for that sound. The other thing about a vintage top is that in addition to the sound getting mellower, the wood tends to darken up into a darker kind of a golden yellow. And in fact, some guitar makers have actually dyed their tops to make the guitar look older. This was before Torrefaction became a thing, where now they're baking it and they get the look and the sound, supposedly, of the older guitars. So I think there's maybe a little bit of a misconception about how long it takes a guitar to age. Certainly, pretty much all of the 50 and 60-year-old guitars that you see, like Martins from the 50s and 60s, for example, are going to have aged wood. But there's also a factor of how much a guitar is actually played and used. If you're playing a guitar a fair amount, I don't know, maybe 5 hours a week is enough, and you're doing that over the course of a number of years, I think you will notice a significant amount of aging in the top between about the 2-year and the 8-year mark, give or take. So once a guitar is 4 or 5 years old, if it's been played a lot, I think you get some of the benefits associated with aging, and you don't necessarily have to have a guitar that's 50 years old or that's had a torrefied top. Again, it depends on what style you're playing. For me, doing a lot of fingerstyle, I like a guitar that has a top that's not really vintage sounding, because I like to use a lot of harmonics and have overtones and have notes ringing out. I think you lose maybe a little bit of sustain when the top is fully aged, like on a vintage guitar. So as with most things, there's a trade-off. And for me, I enjoy the natural aging process of the guitar. I think part of the fun is seeing the top age, watching the color change and listening to the sound as it transitions from a new wood to the old wood. The wood is going to start out, it's going to be, bright, sweet, the notes are going to be round, and it's transitioning to a place where the notes are going to be drier, crisper, warmer, and woodier. Not quite as round, maybe a little bit less sustained. The overtones aren't going to be quite as bloomy, a little bit more controlled. And to me, even though that's a cool sound when the wood is fully aged, I like it in between. I think for me, just my personal taste, you start off, there's an increase in tone, a big improvement, and then somewhere in the middle, I like guitars where they're about, I don't know, between 4 and 7 years old. There's kind of a peak in terms of a nice mix between the new top and the old top characteristics. It's, a little bit sweet, but also a little bit warm. The notes are round, but not too round. It's crisp, but not too dry. And then after that, it kind of falls off a little bit to where it gets really warm, really crisp, really dry. And that's like perfect. That would be someone else's peak if they're playing folk music or bluegrass or old-timey music. That's where they want the top to be. But for me, I kind of like it before it reaches that point. And for that reason, because I enjoy the aging process of the guitar and feel like for what I do, it's going to peak before it's fully aged, I would prefer to have my top wood natural, untorrefied, not baked on the guitars that I buy. But it depends on the style and the player. I think also that there's a certain amount of symbiosis that goes on between the player and the wood. For example, if you're using a lot of alternate tunings and playing in certain keys and you like to hit certain notes, I could be imagining it, but it seems like those notes will be sweeter on the guitar, and perhaps you're also adjusting to what sounds good on the wood to the point where the player and the guitar sort of meld together. So in addition to the fact that I enjoy seeing and hearing a top as it ages, there's also that aspect of maybe the player melds a little bit to the wood and the wood melds a little bit to the player. So anyway, I have played some guitars with torrefied tops that I liked, and I think you probably just want to go on a guitar by guitar basis. Of course, when I'm shopping for a new guitar and it doesn't have a torrefied top and it already sounds good to me, I know it's going to improve with age. But if it does have a torrefied top, I think the back and side woods and the other parts of the guitar are going to age a little bit too. So you'll probably notice at least a little bit of improvement with those guitars. But bear in mind, if you're comparing apples to oranges, that the guitars without the pre-baked tops are going to improve more over time than the ones with the pre-baked tops. So anyway, while I do prefer probably to have a natural top and have it age naturally, I do think there are some really cool guitars with torrefied tops. Some of them have a really cool vintage sound to them. I've played some of Taylor's guitars with torrefied top. They put them on their 600 series, which has maple back and sides. Traditionally, maple is really crisp and bright, so I think they did it to warm those guitars up. And let's see, I played a 612 CE 14 fret neck joint. Really knocked my socks off. Great sounding guitar, and on that particular instrument, the torrefied top really worked well with the back and sides. So overall, you want to take it on a case-by-case basis. I don't think torrefied tops are always going to be better, and I don't think natural tops are always going to be better, though eventually they will age and sound old like the torrefied ones. But at any rate, I just wanted to talk for a little bit about the aging of spruce tops in light of the recent trend that we've seen with all sorts of builders, from boutique to major builders like Martin and Taylor, putting these torrefied tops on some of their guitars. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. I guess another issue with these torrefied tops that people wonder about is how they're going to age. And as of when I'm making this video, they've only been used on guitars for 10 or 15 years, starting with the boutique builders. Major builders like Taylor and Martin have only been using them for several years on their guitars. So it's still relatively new, and I guess there's a question of how will these torrefied tops that are pre-aged sound 20 or 30 years from now. I guess the short answer is, for most of us, who cares? You know, we're really concerned about what our guitar sounds like now. For me, I like the naturally aged tops to where I feel like my playing melds with it and I can enjoy the aging process. As I said, for me, there's a sweet spot before the top has fully aged. It's like a peak, and then as the top becomes, you know, fully aged, it loses a little of what I like about it, but a vintage person may like it. I think over the long term, sound-wise, you'll have the torrefied tops that start out sounding that way, and eventually the non-torrefied ones will catch up because they haven't been baked right at the beginning of their life. Maybe they'll be a little bit sweeter, maybe you won't be able to tell a difference, who knows. Structurally, they're supposed to be sound because they're less prone to shrinking or expanding as wood that is, you know, naturally aging might. Apparently in Europe they use torrefied pre-baked wood for repairs on 400- and 500-year-old structures that the wood is supposed to be more resistant to the elements and that kind of thing. So structurally, I think long term probably going to be okay as well, but again, it's still relatively new, so we'll see.